How many of you remember where you were 50 years ago? When you remember? All right. Okay, I'll talk about it. When then Commander-in-Chief of the United States Army Forces, President Lyndon B. Johnson, declared war on poverty to ensure a minimum standard for all citizens. Now, that was awesome. A minimum standard for all citizens. I want to take you back to 1964. All right. And share with you what my life was like. I was 5 at home living with 8 siblings and my parents. You see, 7 of my older siblings, there's about a 20-age difference there. Wow. It is. Had already left home and they were on their own. I was excited about starting kindergarten and apprehensive about my mother going to vocational school because it was out of town. But I was so happy when she returned home and became a kindergarten teacher and opened up her own beauty salon. Now, my father was a jack of all trades. He had to be to feed his children. He was one of the first African-American school bus drivers. That's when I called you, sister. Because I knew that he and my mother had prayed many years for our community and prayed, and it says, faith without work is nothing. They were out in the trenches like Rita have been, and many of you, and especially our pillars of our community recipients. But now, he was one of the first with his good friend Margaret Freeman's father. Then he went on to start his own company, a logging company, where he went out in the woods with his sons. Now he had free labor, okay? With his sons and harvest trees for firewood and sold that to his neighbors. He was an entrepreneur. He worked in the gym when he got off his route. He was going to make sure that his children ate, and I appreciate him so, and didn't know how poor we were. Right. And January 8th, 1964, President Bain Johnson launched an aggressive attack on the war on poverty. You see, the aftershock, and I know many of you, even though you may have been very young, remember Kennedy's assassination. So this aftermath provided the climate for President Johnson to push through an unprecedented amount of anti-poverty legislation. 2 very pieces of legislation were passed. First, the Civil Rights Bill that President Kennedy promised to sign was passed into law. The Civil Rights Act that banned discrimination based on race and gender in employment and ending segregation in all public facilities. The second piece of legislation signed was the 1964 Economic Opportunity Act, which authorized the creation of the Office of Economic Opportunity that worked with state, local government, nonprofits, and grassroots organizations. The Office of Economic Opportunity was the initial step against the war on poverty. This agency launched the frontline defense right here. You can't get back there. You understand? That was the front line that they developed. And because of that, these programs like Job Corps, Volunteer Service to America Vista, Upward Bound, Head Start, Legal Services, the Neighborhood Youth Corps, the Community Action Program, the College Work Study Program, Neighborhood Development Centers, Small Business Loan, programs, rural programs, Migrant Workers Program, remedial education projects, local health centers, and other programs. The front line, the soldiers on the front line. Now, I'm gonna tell you, this anti-poverty initiative was not a wealth description distribution, I'm sorry, gotta get that out. It was not a wealth distribution program. It was designed to help poor families with a means to live a decent life. Other important measures to address the war on poverty in 1964 include an $11 billion tax cut revenue act, the Food Stamp Act, along with the following legislation in 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the Higher Education Act, the Social Security amendments that created two programs, Medicare and Medicaid, the formation of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Voting Rights Act, the Model Cities Act, and the Fair Housing Act in 1968. President Johnson fought so hard and long, winning many battles to move anti-poverty issues because he knew what it was like to be impoverished. Wow. He lived it here in Texas. He knew also what it took to be a civilized society. We're only as strong as our weakest link. A country stricken with poverty, illiteracy, and inequality cannot compete in a global society. These anti-poverty programs did indeed slash poverty from 19% to 16%. It made a dent in child poverty and deep poverty that makes up 5% of the population earning 50% under the poverty line. In fact, this figure would have been triple if without the war on poverty. We also know that there has been a huge decline in poverty among the elderly as a result of the Social Security and Medicaid programs. Now, here's the unfortunate news. With these victories, I tell you, few people feared hunger, sickness, and illiteracy because their bellies were full. They weren't empty. You know, we like any other people. When we're full, we're content. Just like an animal that is no longer vicious in the zoo because he's fed every day. We were able to send our children to school. We had health care. So with that sigh of relief, we black people got complacent, comfortable. We kicked off our shoes, took a sigh of relief and said, thank God this war is over. Like anybody in their right mind, no one wants to continue to fight. No one wants to continue a battle. However, we went AWOL and became the walking dead foot soldiers in the war on poverty. We lost sight of our enemy, poverty. We handed over our personal responsibility on the war on poverty to the decision makers in Washington. And I know all of you heard that the president said it can't be one here just in Washington, we got to all work together.
That's right. That's right.
Who weren't fit for this gritty war. This was a gritty war. This is the kind of war that you would call Rita. Case in point, look at how America's wealth has declined over the years, and the national debt has climbed because the decision makers in Washington, they have a long history of spending more than they have. Selling America piece by piece to China. China investors own more banks and land in America than Americans. Now, this doesn't let us off the hook. As foot soldiers, we fail to train our new enlistees on how to safeguard our home and community from the enemy and slave master, loan sharks, and predators. Paying the bare minimum on our credit card. We served and still serve as an exemplary stooge on how to live on the master's plantation, happy and free and paying to our creditors forever. Now, we set our children up for poverty when we encourage them to seek degrees and allow them to be eaten alive by loan sharks who offer credit cards and student loans. You see, children, and unfortunately committing suicide because of their outstanding loans. And we teach our children how to fish. Let me correct that. We give them a fish, but we don't teach them how to fish. Debt collectors calling on them right after they graduate and they don't have a job. And they can't get a job because of their bad credit. They got a bad credit because they got outstanding loans from schools. You see the circle? The vicious cycle. As foot soldiers, we don't teach our children on how not to become a prison of war. The poverty